Joining us for more on tonight's topic is Samuel Lorca, the president of Flight Sim Florida, Luis Savigne, director of training at Florida Flight Center, and ABC7 reporter Christopher Brantley. Thank you all for being here. And Christopher, you were the first reporter on the scene that day. That must have been a terrible experience to see. It
was, and it was a long walk down the beach. It was something certainly didn't expect. We got a phone call from a person who listens to the police scanners who said there's a plane crash on Casperson Beach. Rushed down there, got on the beach. I was the only reporter down there. Got to the scene, got very close to the aircraft as it sat there. It was definitely something you don't forget.
I can't imagine the strength that this family has to go on television now, at this point, even 2 years later, and encourage people for organ donation. It's a pretty selfless act.
It is, and I want to say, in the story we said that 5,500 people in Florida are waiting for organ donations and tissue donations right now. And when the family heard that, they very much wanted to help. They thought, this is a tragedy, this is an awful, negative situation. How can we make somebody happy here? How can we turn this around just a little bit, even if to turn it around? And they were able to do that at this point. A little 8-year-old boy was saved. His liver was transplanted from Oceana's, and he now is saved. And they said that that is a spectacular thing for them. They did break down crying, telling us that.
Luis, you are familiar with this type of aircraft and the airport that it was flying in and out of. The question that I have is how and why an aircraft that is experiencing trouble like this would land so close to the shore where you could assume there are people who are bathing?
That's a very difficult question to answer. We are trained to deal with this type of situations when we do pilot training, and the pilot was properly rated, so he had dealt with this before. It was just a judgment call. When that engine ceases, you fly the plane, you try to navigate around houses and human life and things, and it was a very tragic call.
We should point out that even 2 years after the fact, the NTSB has not issued a final report or assigned blame, if any. But is there, and I printed out the preliminary report from the National Transportation Safety Board, is there anything in particular that jumps out at you?
You know, they just departed the airport. They were flying at low altitude. There wasn't much of a glide distance. They did have a little bit of time. When the engine ceased, the plane could have been landed in various...
Should it have been landed a little bit farther out into the water?
It could have been. It's just a matter of how much more gliding distance they had to manipulate the airplane.
Is there anything that strikes you about the fact that this aircraft was not flown for a couple of months and the fuel compartment was partially filled but not all the way? Does the time that the aircraft is not flown have any impact in terms of the fuel that's inside the tanks?
It's a possibility. Usually before we fly an aircraft, we do a thorough pre-flight, which includes sampling of the fuel. We take fuel samples. We're looking for contaminants. There's a possibility that a plane that has been parked outside for several weeks may have some fuel contamination, which can be extracted on a pre-flight.
Samuel, how do you train pilots to handle situations like this?
So pretty much when we ask somebody, or somebody comes to us to school and says, I want to be a pilot, our first question is, why you want to be a pilot? Why are you interested in flying? And then we go through the whole procedure. So pretty much before this person could fly an airplane, he goes to safety checks, pre-flight instructions, and I'm sure that these pilots, with the accident, they went through it also.
What do you teach pilots in terms of if their engines quit and they are over water or near shore in terms of what to do?
Rule number one is fly the plane, avoid obstacles, and find a suitable place to land. Now, depending on the altitude and the glide distance of the airplane is where you're going to go. So you look out the horizon. If you're high, you could go a long way. Let's say a golf course, a beach, like they did. We want to avoid structures like building houses, populated areas. That's number one, rule number one. Now, like I said before, depending on how high is that airplane, is how much time and judgment you can make.
So this pilot may not have been able to go further out into the water.
Possibly.
That's possible.
Although he said that he was concerned if he was over too much water, that it would flip the aircraft because the landing gear was permanently,
Again,
out.
a judgment call. At 1,000 feet of altitude, which he was at the time, this particular aircraft can glide roughly 1.4 to 1.6 feet per mile. So he had about a mile or so of gliding speed to choose suitable spots when this
And
when
it's
this happened.
important to note that for the people who were on the ground at the time, there was no propeller noise. There was no, from what I understand, no sounds of the engine quitting. Everybody said they did not hear a thing, and the propeller was only slightly moving, just like you would have if you had like a glider plane, the kind with the rubber band.
Windmilling.
It was actually windmilling.
Right.
Windmilling.
So there was no forewarning for anybody on the ground.
No.
That is correct. That is correct. Again, it was a judgment call. Could he have landed underwater? Possibly. Did he choose to land underwater? Possibly not.
Christopher, what did the people tell you there that day in terms of what they saw? Did they hear anything whatsoever?
Everyone we talked to out on the scene that day said they didn't hear a single thing until the plane actually hit the ground, until it actually came in for its very hard landing. There was no warning for people on the beach. There was, unless they were looking around and looking in the sky. And as Rebecca Irizarry said, planes don't just fall out of the sky, so people weren't really thinking about looking up and around them. Nobody had any warning.
I'm wondering what the message is here today. Obviously, there's a message in terms of when tragedy happens, if you could help someone else in terms of organ donation, that's important. But it's kind of hard to figure out what the message is, either to people who are just going out to the beach to relax one day, or what would you say to pilots? Is this a terrible cautionary tale that when you're in a situation like this, to have some kind of plan in terms of instinct, in terms of what to do?
Pretty much there is no, I mean, you train for it, and when an incident happens, is training what kicks in. You don't have time to think. I'm going to put them on the sand, I'm going to put them on the water. I mean, is training kicks in. And then you choose the best landing place.
And what could the NTSB or the FAA do in terms of the pilot, in terms of responsibility?
Well, the NTSB, what they will do is look for the cause of the accident. What causes this engine to cease, and that's what, according to the report, they have done certain things about it. Once we get that finding, then we'll know.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight.